I come from a poor background. We had two vehicles, one a van, the other a trailer. Non-traveller folk would call it a caravan. And while I say we were poor in one way, we were rich in another, as there was an abundance of love in my family. To us children, my parents were affectionate and kind, but strict as hell. My parents met at the Doncaster horse races on St. Leger Day in September 1960. They say opposites attract. Well, just as my parents were chalk and cheese, so too were their families. My father's side of the family, the Furies, sold linoleum, soft furnishings, carpets and rugs from door to door. It was called hawking. They were smart people who possessed great people skills. This was down to the fact that they might knock on 500 doors in a single day, having conversations with so many different types of people and absorbing knowledge. On my mother's side, the Skeets were hard-working manual labourers who possessed a gameness and energy about them. Both families were proud and immaculately tidy and brought their kids up strictly. Though I may hail from a long line of boxers and fighters, my father was non-confrontational and never entered the ring himself. At the first sign of raised voices or arguments, he would remove himself from the vicinity. Not because he was a coward, he just hated conflict. You may wonder where my gladiatorial streak comes from. The answer is my mother. She had a dangerously fiery temper, and that is putting it mildly. My earliest memory is seeing my father climb on top of a tin-roofed barn to get some pigeons. I was only 3 years old, and as we watched him fall through the roof, I thought I'd lost my dad forever. My mum came out of the trailer, also thinking he was dead, and then to our relief, we heard him wailing, "I've broken my back. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair." But as we inched closer to the barn with trepidation, my mother at the head of us, on closer inspection, we saw he was absolutely fine. "There's not a broken bone in your body, Hughie," said my mum. "You landed on a bloody hayrick." Being an Irishman, whether it was fair to say he had the look of the Irish remains up for question. After all, he had me for a son, and I was nothing if not a headache. I'll admit I was a bit of a scrapper from the start. The first ever fisticuffs I can remember happened when I was just 5 years old. We'd left Ireland by then and were wintering in Derbyshire. That sounds rather grand. What I mean is that my family had pulled up at a holiday campsite for a few days because our truck was in need of repair. It was snowing, and there was a fair bit of it sticking on the ground. I saw what looked like a 9-year-old, who looked mean as a farmyard cat, picking on a small lad, pushing him around a bit. I don't know why I didn't scare of him. Probably because the little lad he was bothering was my own kin, my younger brother Peter, and he was only 3 years old at the time. I have always had a problem with bullies, picking on those who are weaker than them, just as I've always been compelled to back the underdog. Anyway, I'm straight over to them, placing a gentle hand on Peter's shoulder and separating the two. Then I square up to the tomcat, and it's as if my hands naturally know to ball themselves into two fists, with the thumbs always on the outside so they don't break when you hit something. They now look like medieval maces covered in skin at the end of each arm. The first mace connects with the bully's cheekbone, and he looks at me, wide-eyed, clearly not used to being hit this hard by a 5-year-old. So we fight on for a few minutes in the falling snow, steam shooting out of our noses like bullocks silently going at it. And next thing, we are tussling on the frozen ground of the campsite, rolling ourselves into a hidden nest of barbed wire. I can feel the spikes going into my belly, arms and legs, but one thing they should have told the lad about the Furies is we protect our own, and we never give up. Ever. Doesn't matter how many times we get punctured, kicked or punched.